everybody. Welcome into Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have the entire Dog Nation team with us. I see Jeff Sintel. I see Connor Riley. I see Mike Griffith. Sound a little bit like Romper Room here for a moment. We are happy to have everybody here ready to talk some Georgia football. As I said this morning to kick off Dog Nation Daily, there is no Georgia football on Saturday, but there is still plenty of UGA football conversation to be had. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. Jeff, I can't help but notice that it's about 80 degrees outside, yet you have a fire in the fireplace, I guess for ambiance purposes only. Is that safe to say?
Brandon, I'm looking for a Butler cabin moment. If you catch the Augusta National polo right on right now, I'm looking for a Butler cabin moment right now.
I do like on the Golf Channel broadcast when they do their thing inside Augusta National, they replace the fire with candles. They have a couple rows of candles lit inside the fireplace. I can't do that in my home fireplace because it's gas. I can't take the gas logs out. But I do like the candles inside the fireplace. It's just kind of a cool, look on all of that kind of stuff. And Mike and Connor, hope you're doing well here also. Let's kind of dive into the number one topic here today. We now know that Georgia will not be playing against Missouri on Saturday. And I think for a lot of Georgia fans, this is a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. They wanted to see their team get back at it. I think Kirby Smart himself this week has said that Georgia was in need of a game. They won't get one on Saturday, but we still will look forward to, we hope, 4 remaining games for UGA still yet to come here this season. And there's no championship to play for. There's no big rivalry game at the end of the year. Georgia traditionally has had both Auburn and Tech still yet to come at this point in the season. That's not really the case right now. So with that in mind, I guess, Mike Griffith, I'll start with you. What exactly is Georgia playing for at this point?
I think they're playing to get back in the top 10. They had a streak of 58 straight weeks in the top 10 that dated back to 2016. I think they want to get to a New Year's Bowl. I think they want to show they're still a championship caliber program. I think that they want to show you that this offense has got some potential. As Kirby said earlier this week, you don't just become an explosive offense overnight. And I think the big question now is, will a quarterback change trigger that? And we're going to find out, I think, about JT Daniels to some degree, whether he starts or gets an opportunity. Maybe we'll see some Carson Beck. But I do think that at this stage of the season right now, you want to have an opportunity to see that offense evolve a little bit. And if we're being honest, you could probably beat any of these last 4 opponents with just about any game plan you went with offensively.
Yeah, Mike, for me, I will say both, I guess, as a quasi-analyst and a fan, I am a little bit disappointed they don't have one more game against one slightly better team as some sort of measuring stick. I mean, Missouri on the road is no easy test, and Georgia's playing in the snow come December. That game may get even tougher. But you almost wish there was just a little bit of a step up in competition. Right now, Mississippi State's a struggling program. Vanderbilt's a struggling program. At South Carolina, a little bit difficult to know what you get from the Gamecocks. Do you join me in saying you almost wish they were just playing a slightly – I wish they were playing a way better team, but I would settle for even a slightly better team than the collection of teams they have in place in the remainder of this schedule right now.
Yeah, and that's why I think the bowl game is important. And hey, let's not forget, Florida's 4 of the last 5 games for Florida. I'm not saying that they'll likely lose, but could Arkansas take them down? Could LSU take them down? Kentucky's defense has been salty. Can Joey Gatewood get good enough to do just enough? What's the status of Kyle Pitts? If Florida loses 2 of the last 5 games, and it's a COVID-19 year, you never rule it out. But to your point, yes, I think it's very important that they play a good opponent in a New Year's Six Bowl. I've seen Cincinnati projected. That's not good enough for me. I'd rather see another Power 5 opponent on the other side of the ball than Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl.
There is nothing more 2020 than Cincinnati 40 miles down the road in a bowl game. There's nothing that screams just a year to just, forget about forever than to play, an American Athletic Conference team 50-mile drive from your home. That does not sound like a fun way to end the season. Connor, what do you think Georgia's still playing for?
To get better in 2021. The point Mike made that I really agree with is I don't think it really matters who they trot out there at quarterback. They should win all 4 of these remaining games regardless. And this team goes 8-2 in an SEC schedule. Yes, they'll have lost to the 2 best teams in their schedule, but that probably puts you in line for the Peach Bowl there. So for me, the most important thing I think I'm looking for is the guy who's going to be the guy in 2021 for at the quarterback position? Is he on the roster right now? Is that JT Daniels? Is it Carson Beck? Is it even Dwan Mathis or Stetson Bennett? They need to find out and try and win games, scoring a lot of points, making a lot of downfield throws, doing the sort of things that you've seen Alabama and Florida do. Do that against lesser opponents, because how you play in those games makes it easier for you to make those sort of plays against Florida and Alabama. Because if you're just going to try and run out the clock and win 21-3 or 21-10, that's not going to help you all that much beat the Alabamas and the Florida of the world, in my opinion.
Do you agree with what I've been saying on Dog Nation Daily a little bit this week, which is Georgia's got to kind of whittle its competition for quarterback down? I'm going to give you one veteran, whether it be a guy you've currently got, or you can go out and get one transfer, not two anymore. I need you to get one transfer or one guy that's currently here, put him in a competition against Brock Vandagriff, is kind of the hotshot freshman. That's the kind of archetype for the modern quarterback competition. Young, incoming elite recruit, guy who's played a little bit before. And it's a one-on-one battle between two guys. May the best man win, and maybe it's an ongoing thing where the younger guy overtakes the guy during the season. That's really all I have an appetite for when it comes to the Georgia quarterback for next season. I can't have multiple transfers. I can't have, multiple guys who are already in the roster getting equal consideration. I feel like it's got to be one guy versus one guy. And between those two, if you can't find a quarterback, then something's really, really wrong.
Yeah, what's the old saying? If you have two quarterbacks, you have none. Well, what do you have if you have three or four quarterbacks? Because if Georgia had a game this weekend, it sounds like JT Daniels was going to get the start, which would have been Georgia's third starting quarterback this year. And I'm interested on Jeff's perspective on this, because I've got a story coming tomorrow on the 2021 quarterback situation and what it means with regards to Brock Vandagriff, because as you and we've all sort of written and talked about, yes, he's a five-star quarterback, but not all five-star quarterbacks are created equal. And to expect him to be a Trevor Lawrence type right away, that's certainly not fair to Vandagriff. And I don't know if that's the type of quarterback he is, but Georgia opens the season next year against Clemson. And personally, I don't think that's the type of team you want to throw a first-time starter out there against.
Yeah, Jeff, before you kind of tell me about the 2020 season, what's left to go for Georgia, pick up on what Connor said right there. Open-ended, how good do you think Brock Vandagriff is?
Yeah, I guess here's the mic check I'll give you guys. I guess I'll standardize where I see Brock. Now, Brock's a five-star quarterback, and for those that wonder about, how good is he really, they're critiquing his tape, got to remember this one very salient point, and that is Lincoln Riley had him handpicked to be his quarterback of the future at Oklahoma, and he still would be the quarterback of the future at Oklahoma if he wanted to stick there. That decision was made to come back closer to family. And let me spin this a different way. And I hope I don't sound too snarky as I say this, but this is reality. For me, I will know when Brock Vandagriff is the real thing. And when Brock Vandagriff is all that is when Kirby Smart mentions him in the 1 or 2 deep in August. If he goes out there and he passes that litmus for Kirby Smart, which basically means you're a freshman, you're going to put the ball in places I would rather you not put the ball in places. And for him to be able to earn either first or second team status in September of 2021, that will certainly show me that Brock Vandagriff is as advertised. He is good enough to bypass that early learning curve for Georgia with freshmen. Brock's going to be a lot of upgrades, man. He just dropped his 8-game senior film today. It concluded a senior portrait in a tuxedo. You don't normally see that at all on some senior highlight films. You also saw some really big shot throws. And what I mean by that is there was that sidearm throw. There was one throw where he completes 2 balls on that senior highlight film. And there's gobs of stats and gobs of plays. But the thing that really interested me is how he was pushing the ball down the field with great accuracy. There's 2 balls, Brandon, that he completes where the ball sails 45 plus yards in the air at the high school level. Now, you can say what you want about the snarkiness of single A football, but this is a young man that has a lot of football intelligence, a lot of football acumen. He comes from a family of athletes. He's going to pass the look test. He's going to be big. Nobody's going to talk about Georgia's quarterback being short anymore. Getting passes blocked at the line. And if Brock Vandagriff becomes that guy, which I think kind of ties into my answer to the first question, if Brock Vandagriff becomes that guy,
yeah,
going to be difficult to do. But if he's in the running and if he's getting out there early game 1, game 2, that will tell me red flashing lights that Brock Vandagriff is really 5-star special.
What do you think Georgia's still playing for the rest of this season?
I think Georgia, I don't know if this slogan's been used yet, Brandon, or with great success, but I think they got to make Georgia great again, at least in the eyes of the recruiting world, in the eyes of I think they do. Connor, they do, man. They've got to make this program have some juice, as Kirby said this week, some buzz. Right now, there's the wonder whether Georgia, is that a program still skyrocketing way up high, or is that a program with internal problems that need to be kind of triaged out? And for me, you need some electricity at the triggerman position, and I think that would solve a lot of issues. For me, you've got to make this offense, and you've got to make, whether it's JT Daniels or Dwan Mathis or Carson Beck, I think the thing they might need next year is graduate transfer or transfer wide receivers to really make this offense cook next year.
Yeah, I want to talk receivers here for a moment because that's kind of my answer to this. And I understand why you think they might need to reach into the transfer portal for some of that. Obviously, this is another year in which the wide receiver position seems to leave something to be desired. But what Georgia can have next season that it really did not have at the start of this year and certainly didn't have at the beginning of last year is returning production at wide receiver. I talked about that this morning on Dog Nation Daily, that some of the stat gurus, the math guys will tell you that percentage of returning receiving yards from a year ago can be as predictive of your future success as anything. Even the returning quarterback, that experienced receiver just really matters. And the struggles that Georgia has had receivers the last couple of years, in a lot of ways, has been predicted by the fact they didn't bring back a lot of experience measured by returning yards in either of the last two seasons. So you've got 4 games left where you can throw the ball a lot to Jermaine Burton. You can throw the ball a lot to George Pickens, who expects to be back next season. You can throw the ball to, some of these guys, Karis Jackson, another example of this, so that you will have experience at receiver next year. And no matter who your quarterback is, whether it's JT Daniels or somebody else that's currently on this roster, or maybe Brock Vandagriff gets his chance, whoever that quarterback is, Jeff, more likely to play well if there's returning production receiver. In 2021, Georgia can have that in a way it has not had the last couple of years. And these next 4 games to get a little bit more seasoning on those receivers, I think that's a great opportunity.
And I just think there's too much of pressure around this program. You saw it with Jake Cremata shanking punts when he was kicking at an all-SEC level against Florida. You saw those big-time corners that were just getting beat. And I think everybody is just so wound up really tight that they realize that they can't get in a shootout and points will be at a premium with an offense with firepower like an Alabama, like a Florida. And I think it kind of just doesn't allow Georgia to have fun, play loose, play fast. You see play like Mark Webb Jr., man, he was a former wide receiver in high school. That's what he was rated coming out of high school. They cross-trained him over to be a DB at Georgia. I mean, those are plays where your senior guys, your fourth-year guys, in the absence of X, in the absence of Y, in the absence of Z, those are the things where you show how deep you are and how well you've recruited over the last 4 or 5 years. Brendan, I think the main thing, I've heard it a lot on the national scene, is somehow Georgia's got all this talent, but I would say they're devoid of one single star on this roster right now. At least one of those guys that is a guy that you would billboard before the CBS or late night broadcast.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
One thing Jeff touched on that I want to
go ahead, Connor.
Mention there, the word he used was fun. Georgia, other than maybe the Auburn game this year, and even going back farther to last year, haven't been a whole lot of fun games where Georgia's just rolling up points, making big plays, making big hits. Even the Tennessee game, that wasn't all that fun for 3.5 quarters there. Mm-hmm. One of the things for 2020 that I would like to see, let these guys have fun again. Make Georgia, I won't use the phrase that Jeff used that was aligned to a current former president. Make Georgia fun again. Make it, like sort of what we saw with the Bobo offenses, what we saw in 2007 with the black jerseys. Make Georgia come out, have fun, be a fun, freewheeling team. Because when Alabama's doing it, it looks like they're having fun. When Florida's doing it, looks like they're having fun.
I mean, Mike, I would say that last year's Sugar Bowl was one of the rare examples when Georgia did have fun, or at least it looked like it to me they were having fun. They kind of let loose, figuratively speaking, let their hair down a little bit and just went out there and played. I think Connor's right. Really, you want to go back and look at the last 3 years. In some ways, this has just been kind of a slog of expectations are so high and, nothing's ever quite as pretty as it's supposed to be in terms of final margins of victory or style with which it gets done. The Sugar Bowl last year against Baylor was a little bit of a departure from some of that. I kind of agree with Connor on this, Mike. I wouldn't mind saying one way or another them just kind of cut loose and have some fun, even if it's not a thing of beauty right now, because I still think the offense is going to be a work in progress, and the team overall is probably in need of some smoothing of some rough edges. Just go out there and let it rip a little bit and try to finish the season on a high note. Make it fun.
Yeah, put Georgia first. I agree. Have some fun with the program. Get some of these guys involved that we haven't seen yet. And as Connor said, I don't think they can score enough points. And I know that's not typically Kirby's style, but I think Kirby needs to make a statement. I think he needed to win the locker room back, and I think he's done that. I think it's one of the more unfortunate things of this season was the way Stetson Bennett played out. What started out as a great story became a fan base that couldn't wait to see the next guy in there. And that's unfortunate because I think Stetson Bennett did all he could. And of course he wanted to go back and play injured. It's not his fault. He was the best option at that time. When Dwan Mathis was put in, I think you saw that. JT Daniels' knee injury and the fact that Kirby didn't feel like he was mobile enough early on. Clearly that was likely it. I think once people see JT Daniels play, they'll recognize that had to be it. Some of his throws to the outside maybe didn't have the kind of juice on him that they did at USC. And, he's had the last week to maybe show otherwise now. So, or Carson Beck for that matter. Again, I don't want to count Carson out like the poor reporter from Jacksonville that tried to put words in Kirby Smart's mouth on a teleconference, which is one of the most ill-advised things you could do at any point, but especially after a 16-point loss to Florida. But I'm with you. The Sugar Bowl was refreshing. It was guys going out there taking advantage of opportunities. And I believe that's what we would have seen at Missouri. I think that would have been a big win for Georgia. Now that George Pickens is back, I think they're going to take the top off some of these defenses. And I think that's going to make things better for the run game as well.
And I want to say one more thing here. And, pardon me for being a guy that points out another thing that Georgia's missing this year on the field, off the field. But, man, Georgia's digital graphics team, their audio-video team is excellent. Here's what you're not seeing, because I knew if they had this footage, if it was happening, it'd be out there. Remember those Kirby moments in the locker room where he's yeeting and he's dancing and they're just having fun, whether it's against Auburn, Tennessee, Arkansas? None of these wins trigger this jubilation anymore. And football is supposed to be. Yeah,
but hold on. I'm going to stop you. Cancel culture is coming after you if you celebrate in the locker room in 2020. I think that's why they're not doing that. That's a good point. I don't think cancel culture will let you celebrate in 2020.
I mean, the Saints got some heat this weekend for celebrating their win over Tampa Bay on Sunday night that I saw. So, largely, I do agree with that point. I think maybe Kirby is so tightly wound and so focused on championships, which is what you want if you're Georgia. But it's okay to stop and smell the roses from time to time as well.
And, Jeff, I actually think you're making a good point. I'm half kidding, half serious. I do think cancel culture has got the knives out for celebrations right now. But the larger point you're making is true, so I will give you the dignity of finishing.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I get your point about, masks and is that safe. But, man, Sam Pittman's found something with the jukebox. Coastal Carolina, of all folks, have found some fun, too. There just needs to be a fun moment where there's a release of all this energy and young men can be young men and have fun after a game, because you might not be out there for the cameras, but you just need to see a little bit more joy out of this team.
I totally agree with that. It's a Cover 4 line presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. That is Jeff Santel. Got Connor Riley here, Mike Griffith here. Somebody said I look like I've got the smoking jacket on, the mood lights here. My house, for some reason, is always really dark, so I'm always having to blast the lights to kind of allow me to be seen. I am kind of rocked back in kind of the couch here, so I'm a little farther away from the camera maybe than some of my colleagues are. But nonetheless, we're glad to have you on Cover 4 Live here tonight, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Big thanks to them for making it all possible, not just for sponsoring us on our show, but doing the hard work that's necessary to take care of Georgia's farmers and really standing up to support Georgia's agricultural community. It's one of the things that I think about when I serve my family food. We sit down at the table together, we enjoy a meal, we say, thanks for that food. And when I think about where it came from, I think about the farmland in Georgia that produces so much of that food. And we're just really lucky in Georgia to have such a great agricultural history. The heritage of our state is so closely tied to the food that we get to eat, served up and grown by Georgia's farmers. And Georgia Farm Bureau understands that as well. They support them. They live in those communities. They work in those communities. They are a part of those communities, a part of the fabric of those communities, standing up, supporting Georgia's farmers, providing big time savings on home insurance, life insurance, auto insurance. That's what Georgia Farm Bureau is famous for. You can find them out for yourself. You can find that out for yourself when you check out the website, gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. Remember, the Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team, providing great support to the agricultural community, and therefore it's a service that benefits us all. We love Georgia Farm Bureau and happy to have them as a part of our Cover 4 Live broadcast. All right, let's move on to this. Topic number 2 here today. So Georgia obviously reeling, coming off a bad loss to Florida. And in the aftermath of that, you're kind of bracing for what's going to come next. You saw, Terry Arnold the other day with a little bit of a tweet kind of acknowledging the Gators after the win. Arnold's a defensive back that's been thought to be choosing potentially between Georgia and Florida. There's been a little bit of chatter about another prospect, Xavier Sorey, the 4-star linebacker, maybe because or not because of the win, but seeming a little bit more closely connected to Florida as of late. Jeff, let me start with you since this is your universe, and we'll kind of expand it out to everybody else here as well. How much do you think the loss to Florida has the potential to, it could really be a positive or a negative impact, but let's just stay with the negative part of this for a moment. Do you think the loss to Florida has the potential of hurting Georgia's 2021 recruiting class?
Brendan, I think it's just everything. It's how they lost to Florida, if you can follow me along the lines on that one. They didn't look explosive. It looked like they having issues with personnel. I think, and with Terry, and you got to remember, he's attracted by Georgia's DBs, the defensive style of the way Georgia plays, and that was an exposure game for Georgia's defensive backs, even with Richard LeCount out of the game. And I think, it was always going to be Bama, Florida, Georgia for Terry and Arnold. Xavier Sorey, a guy that, we've followed and we reported the link that Xavier Sorey and Terry and Arnold want to play together in college. He has Florida and Georgia as well. I think it's a big chink in the armor about Georgia's defensive reputation and defensive swagger. And, there's just not enough. We keep coming onto it. We've been noticing this earlier in this year. Just something feels off with this Georgia program this year, whether it's internally, whether it's a lot of these issues that Professor Griffith just mentioned, they got ironed out, at least by his guys and what he sees about how Georgia's working to mend some things, man. And I think the other thing here is very important and very simply, I'm going to say this. Normally, wins and losses don't matter because if a guy has already got his heart set on to go there and make a tradition and establish his own legacy, if they lose, it's kind of a negative positive. I mean, what I mean by that is it really matters nil because they go, I want to be a guy that goes in there and changes that and restores it and put things up. But I think in this year, this COVID-19 year pandemic where, man, all they got is Wi-Fi's and Zooms and things to go off of, I think the visit becomes, with that taken off the board, I think these wins and losses become more impressionable than they ever did because you don't have that heart-to-heart chat in Kirby's office or heart-to-heart chat in Dan Lanning's office where everybody lays their cards out on the table and says, son, we really want you. You can see it in my eyes. We're gonna hold this scholarship for you, or you're gonna have to tell me no before we go somewhere else. Those things just aren't happening right now, and they can't happen in a Zoom, especially after they come out of a rowdy and incredible game day environment. That's just not happening as well.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, I mean, 571 yards against your defense. I mean, that's, 564 Alabama. I mean, these are numbers that hadn't been seen at Georgia since 2013 and numbers that hadn't been put up against Kirby Smart since 2014 when he was at Alabama. So, I agree. Now, that said, I do think early playing time, Jeff was talking about a negative positive. I guess I'll call it a positive negative. Not exactly sure where this circle of words ends, but the fact of the matter is that these kids are going to see an opportunity to play early because of the level of play was substandard. And quite frankly, I think Eric Stokes, by the way, is quietly having an All-American year. He was outstanding. I don't think he got exposed at all. I thought he was phenomenal. Mark Webb dropping a pick six. He's not going to play in the NFL. We knew that anyway. I don't care what position he played in high school. That was a big play that he blew. Monty Rice getting beat on a wheel route. To me, what's missing is the seniors executing. And for a team to be great, you need your older players to play their best football. Richard LeCount not being out there. I think that hurts. I'm not saying one guy changes it, but you can't ignore, Jordan Davis, you talk about fun and jovial. He's the guy that leads the dance in the locker room. We've seen it on the practice field. You don't replace 6'6", 340. Injuries have played a role, and quarterback play has been poor. Guys, less than a month ago, they're up 24-20 on the road against number 1 Alabama. Even with all of these issues that we're talking about have come to fruition, even with a former walk-on quarterback at quarterback, Georgia is, which is good that a former walk-on quarterback's at quarterback as opposed to being at linebacker or kicker. But all these things are catching up with Georgia now, right? Now we see Kirby's ability for damage control. That's what's going to happen this off week. And I think that energy level and what happens these next 4 weeks, I think there's time to generate some energy. I think there's time to generate some wow. I mean, let's face it, guys. We've all been that walking through the airport and said, wait, did I just see that score? Georgia scored how many on Mississippi State? They need some wow games. And that's what's got to happen is, holy cow, Georgia's put up 63 points in 3 of their last 4 games, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing, just Kirby dropping the F, he did that intentionally after the off. You've got to do something to recapture some momentum. And Connor, you look like you have some ideas. What, in addition to the points, what are you seeing?
Well, I was just going to say, I've never walked through an airport on a Saturday. And quite frankly, this is the most Saturdays I've had off in my adult life. And really since even going back to college with all these cancellations and bye weeks and whatnot. But yeah, I think the points Mike and Jeff have both brought up so far are valid. And sort of one thing, we mentioned it earlier with the wide receivers, Georgia needs their freshman wide receivers to play well and to put up numbers, because that's what's ultimately going to appeal going forward to those big time offensive recruits, which Georgia sort of needs. They need their quarterbacks to go out and play well, because while, yeah, you can sell them on early playing time, and I certainly think that's a fair point, especially on the defensive side of the ball, these guys now need to see that they're going to be developed. And when you bring in 3 top 100 wide receivers like Georgia did in this last class, you need them to develop and become great players. George Pickens and I think Dominic Blaylock a year ago were on that track. But now, Blaylock with the knee injury and Pickens with his upper body injury and some of the off-field stuff, while recruiting, yes, it's still very important. Georgia needs to find a way, I think, especially on offense, to win and get the most out of the guys they have there right now.
Jeff, I will say that's my biggest concern about Georgia recruiting. I'm saying this as someone who obviously wants Georgia to get all the players they can get and win a bunch of games and everything else. Are they turning these players into first-round draft picks? We are now in the stage where the 2017 class, ranked number 3 in the country at the time, these guys are seniors now. The number 1 class in 2018, the ones that are still here, these guys are juniors. Next year, the 2019 class that had some huge players, those guys will be juniors. Are we taking these guys that were 5 stars? Are we seeing them move through the program at Georgia and come out on the other end as very rich men drafted in the first round? Alabama's doing that. LSU did that a year ago. Ohio State has done that. The thing that I worry about affecting Georgia recruiting is not so much an on-field loss to Florida, because I'm like you. I think we have a tendency to overrate the result of any one game on recruiting. But let the cement harden on the notion that, 5 stars go into the Georgia program and they come out on the other side, 4th-round draft picks. That is the kind of thing that I do think has the potential of slowing down this recruiting machine. And I'm really hopeful that over the course of the next couple of years, Georgia has some big-time draft success with the recruiting wins that it has gotten. Otherwise, I do think the recruiting momentum is probably going to start slowing down.
I got one for you, sir. See that right there? That's the fireplace. It's now 61 degrees here in Woodstock. Here comes your hot take. The problems with Georgia are totally internal. I'm not going to say anything about – Brennan, I could give you Terry and Arnold, Nyland Green, Shmile Munden, Corey Foreman, Mason Smith on this roster right now. Those things are not going to fix what ails Georgia in the 2021 season. Those guys would be great, but they can't get better corners that have spent 3 years in Georgia's system, like Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes and DJ Daniel. They can't get better guys than Richard LeCount. They can't get better guys than Jermaine Johnson, Nolan Smith, Azeez Ojulari. Those guys off the recruiting trail in 1 year to juice up this roster in 2021. I think the other thing that must be said, and I don't know if we cover this a lot, Brandon, everybody relies on 2017 and the 2018 classes. With what's left in that program now in Athens, those are probably top 8, top 10 recruiting classes. Those are splintered classes. And next year, I could give you a Jamari Salyer maybe, But next year's team will mostly be built off the 2019 and 2020 recruiting classes.
So here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, let me move on then to kind of a semi-related target. So when you look at what Georgia's about to recruit, what it's trying to still bring in the program, what the losses to Alabama and Florida have demonstrated that Georgia needs, Connor, what do you think the recruiting priorities are right now? What are the position lists, or maybe it's an individual name? Where are those priorities at the moment?
For me, they need Brock Vandagriff to be the guy. Maybe not necessarily in 2021, but they need him to be sort of the future of the position there at quarterback for Georgia going forward. Certainly in 2022 and 2023, I think they need him to be a really good player. Again, maybe not right away. Maybe you find something with JT Daniels, Carson Beck, et cetera, going forward. But you look at what Justin Fields has done for Ohio State. I know he's a taboo name there, but he has sort of reset everything since he got there, because even when Dwayne Haskins was there putting up big numbers, that Ohio State team still wasn't getting into the playoff. And when you hit on your quarterback and your quarterback's the guy, you sort of saw this with Tua. I think his arrival at Alabama was well-timed. When you hit on a quarterback and he is the guy, Deshaun Watson at Clemson, that changes everything about your program. It makes the entire program sing. It makes wide receivers want to come play with you. It makes great defensive players want to come with you. If you hit on your quarterback and he looks like he's the guy, it changes the way everyone and everything talks about your program. So for me, Georgia's fortunate that they already have this guy in Brock Vandagriff, but they, again, maybe not in 2021, that might be expecting too much, but in 2022 and 2023, they need Vandagriff to be the face of the Georgia program.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you got to have a trigger. I say it all the time, whether it's Carson Beck or Vandagriff or, I think if JT Daniels could be that guy the rest of this year and next year. But to Connor's point, you need somebody that can help take this program into the future. I mean, I know Clemson won a national title with Deshaun Watson, but I mean, Trevor Lawrence, the returns on Trevor Lawrence are unbelievable. I think he's probably the best college quarterback since Peyton Manning, in my opinion. And we haven't even seen the best of Trevor. Unfortunately, the COVID crisis and the New York Jets await, it appears. Poor guy. But Trevor Lawrence, a player like that, though, that makes a difference. Ohio State was already Ohio State. Listen, they've won. I've watched Ohio State dominate that league for a year with quarterbacks that go on to the NFL and don't do anything. Haskins has already flamed out. I've seen him get beat by less talented teams. Ohio State is Ohio State. With or without Justin Fields, they'd be doing just fine right now. But if you can get a guy that truly leads a program, that truly brings that charisma, I think Jake started out that way. But I think that 2018 SEC championship game, really let the air out of the sails. And then, of course, as you pointed out, BA, no experienced receivers coming back in 2019. And then you throw the injuries on that. And here we go again. So I think everybody's hitting the right points. Get your trigger, get you some experienced receivers back to give you an opportunity for that explosive game and that personality that, when Jeff Sentell calls a recruit, they're going to want to pick up and say, hey, this is the guy from Georgia. I want to talk to the recruiting guy from Georgia. I want Jeff to tell me all about Carson Beck or JT Daniels or Brock Vandagriff, instead of going, Jeff, got a call from Dan Mullen on the other line. I'll call you back later. You want to have something about the program redeeming. These kids are in school when BA's on TV. They don't get to watch Dog Nation Daily, man. So Kirby's got to get it done on
I feel
Saturday.
like some of them are sneaking their phone, like the old school, 1950s, listen to the World Series game with the transistor radio.
No,
some of these guys are sneaking second period, getting a little Dog Nation Daily on their phone.
They're listening to the podcast wherever they can find it: Spotify, Google Plus, iTunes, wherever. They're the kids these days. They're podcast people.
Thank you. Yeah, 99% of the audience is not listening live anyway, so that's a very good point, Connor and Mike. I certainly appreciate the plug there on that. Let me bring up a different position here for a moment, if you don't mind. And Jeff, I obviously want to hear from you on this topic too, but I think it's really interesting. I'll use a little softer word than maybe I want to here. That after 3 years in the program, the only player for Georgia that can do what Jordan Davis does is Jordan Davis. I guess prior to him in 2017, John Atkins filled that role a little bit. I think we all knew that Atkins was one of those quiet losses for Georgia after that season that'd be difficult to replace. At the beginning of the year in 2018, Georgia didn't really have that 3-4 nose, and the results obviously kind of showed that. Georgia had a hard time stopping the run. Davis emerges, everything is good. And then on Saturday, he's not in the game, and you wondered how big of a loss would that be. Well, as it turns out, it's every big as you thought it might be. Jeff, whether it be recruiting a Davis or developing another Davis, it's a little concerning to me that a guy like this has been such a crucial part of the Georgia defense, in that Georgia's got a lot of defensive linemen that can play, but it's really only got that one guy that you really trust to man the middle. I don't know how you address that. There's a chance Davis goes to the pros at the end of the season. I think there's actually probably a very good chance that he does. And there's just not an obvious Jordan Davis waiting in the wings. Certainly Georgia didn't really have another Davis on Saturday. I think that's a pretty quiet concern that ought to get some more attention, Jeff.
Yeah, but I think the thing there is that there's not one coming. There's very few guys that you look at and say I thought Eli Drinkwitz of Missouri really capsulized it well this week when he talked about, he thought Richie and he thought Jordan were first rounders. He called them erasers. How Jordan you could run a lot of cheap boxes where you could only go with about 5 guys, but Jordan, because he could take up both A gap and B gap, he could be a true two gap eraser in a scheme. You can kind of cheat boxes and you can give so much flexibility to the defense. I think Timon Mitchell, the guy out of Nashville, Tennessee, very smart guy in the 2019 class, was a guy that they thought maybe could do that. I mean, heck, man, but if, Jonathan Jefferson, Tyrion Ingram, Dawkins, even Mason Smith, those guys are not the zero tech, the type of athlete that Jordan Davis is. And there's not really a lot of them, those 6'6", 330 guys that can move like Jordan Davis as well. I mean,
amazing that he was only a 3-star prospect, because he's been better than that from the very minute he got here.
Well, he didn't camp a lot, but then he was a guy where a lot of recruiting guys wondered if he was an offensive tackle, an offensive lineman, or a true defensive tackle. I think that's what's interesting. And I mean, everybody's going to point out that what Georgia didn't have in terms of what was on the field, but that Florida game, I think I'm going to look back on that Florida game 2 or 3 years from now, and I'm going to wonder, maybe one of the bigger factors wasn't Kyle Trask, wasn't Kyle Pitts, wasn't the lack of quarterbacks from Georgia. But you got to remember, while Georgia was dealing with a Tennessee and Georgia was dealing with a Kentucky, Florida basically had the entire month of October off to get ready for Georgia. Now, I'm not saying that's why they lost. I'm not going to be that guy that holds up that's why they lost card. But I'm saying that attrition of bodies and the way Georgia's just started losing guys, you got to think, guys like Quay Walker, guys like Warren Brinson, that sort of thing right there compounded the issue where Georgia doesn't have that depth.
You've been talking to Mike too much. When I think back to that Florida game, I think Tyreek Stevenson in great position to make a play on a ball against Kyle Pitts. And Kirby said after the game, Tyreek is their best ball in the air defender. He slips and falls. Tyson Campbell, a guy who coming into the season had a lot of hype and for some reason is still getting first round draft type. He gets beat one-on-one situation for 2 touchdowns. Mike's already brought up Mark Webb. I know injuries were a concern. And yes, not having Richie out there. And Jordan Davis, to answer, I think, BA's original question, I just think he's a one of one. There's only one guy sort of out there like that. There's a reason you see him as the top interior defensive lineman in mock drafts, and I read more than I should out of those. But when I look back at the Florida game, injuries happen. There are injuries on both sides. But Georgia against Florida, for me, their secondary had a chance to make a lot of plays. And for whatever reason that day, whether it be a slick field or whatnot, they just didn't. And Florida's playmakers went out and made those plays instead.
Is that more of a hand-finding thing, Connor? Is there a technique that can be taught when you are body to body with somebody? Because I would say that Campbell was in pretty good position with Pitts. Is there a hand-finding thing that gives you a chance to win more of those battles? And I'm obviously just grasping at straws.
Yeah, maybe. One thing I think of, Campbell, again, coming out of high school, he hadn't played a whole lot of corner. And then he misses most of last season as well. And I think you compare him to Eric Stokes, who had played a fair amount of corner coming in and then has played pretty consistently these last 3 years. And maybe the difference between the two of them right now is just Stokes has that timing down. He has that extra playing time to where he knows when to look for a ball or how to go make a play out on a ball. Whereas I think Campbell, while yes, he has all the physical traits in the world, those small little mental things, especially that you need to play cornerback at a really high level, as I think he still can at the NFL level, it takes a while to sort of get those reps and get those timing and get sort of your bearings about where the ball might be and locating it and knocking it out of the air.
And
Jeff,
to your point, BA.
Go ahead, Don. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, to your point, BA, when you got a 6'6" guy doing this in front of you, like last year, that makes a difference. And when you're able to move Trask out of the pocket, off platform, so to speak, that makes a difference. The lack of pressure that Georgia got on Kyle Trask, to me, was the number one thing. The number two thing was how that inefficient offense went 3 and out on 4 out of 5 series and gave Florida as many possessions in the first half as they had in the entire game last year. So, all those little things add up. I mean, give Trask credit. I mean, he was putting the ball in some beautiful windows, but he was doing so uninterrupted. Azeez Ojulari, I think he had a couple pressures, Jeff, but he's not winning that one-on-one. And it didn't look like Georgia really truly brought the blitz, the extra defender, until the second half. And once they did that, Trask looked pretty human. And I don't buy, well, Florida didn't want to run it up. Well, yes, they absolutely would have had they had the opportunity. They threw 17 passes and ran 17 times. They scored 6 points because of the halftime adjustments, even without Jordan Davis. So I don't want to put it all on Tyson Campbell. I think the secondary, a lot of what they do is predicated by the pass rush. I do think, though, Connor's point about the Tyreek Stevenson slip, I mean, that's a pick. I mean, that's an interception. That's a huge play. But for me, guys, it's all quarterback. I mean, there's 6 or 7 shot plays. You look at Kieris being overthrown, D-Rob being overthrown. The biggest play of the game was the Matt Landers overthrow with 45 seconds left. And if Stetson Bennett hits Matt Landers, you're getting at least a field goal, maybe 7. So you close to 31-24. Instead, you overthrow and miss badly. Florida gets the ball, scores 7 points. Now they're up 17. That's a 10-point swing on Stetson Bennett not hitting an open receiver.
Go ahead.
One really quick thing to Mike's point. Kirby's preached on accuracy this week. Our buddy SEC StatCat. Do you know the 2 quarterbacks who rank last and next to last in adjusted completion percent or accuracy?
I have a feeling I do.
It's Juwan Mathis and Stetson Bennett. And to Mike's point, I think that says a lot.
Jeff, what do you want to say?
Yeah, here's the point. I guess when I'm going to look back on it, I'm going to say this. That was Kyle Trask throwing the ball where it needed to be, but those were first-round talents, big players for Florida, making plays over. Same thing for the Alabama game, making plays over guys that were not as talented, not future upside for a lot of those 50-50 balls. The one discussion I had this week with a lot of people who follow football, DB trainers, coaches, they're bringing up the point that Georgia probably needs to back off its plan of being that physical, handsy press man defense at all times. I know it's what Kirby Smart believes in. I know it's what Dan Lanning and Charlton Warren believe in. I know it's what guys like Keely Ringo and guys like Terrion Arnold and Nyland Green want to hear. But if you look at these elite receivers, like the ones that LSU had, the ones that Alabama has had, and the ones that they have in terms of Florida, even with the Trevon Grimes, former 5-star, Justin Shorter, former 5-star Kyle Pitts, those are NFL first-round guys. And when you look at the league, you look at the elite wide receivers in the NFL, nobody's covering those guys like that on every snap like that. They're playing some off man. They're mixing things up. They're not always getting their hands because these guys off the line have route adjustments with exotic routes they can make and those next level talents. I think Georgia in a big ball game like that needs to, whether you do it in the offseason and you look at metrics and you go to the NFL, Georgia's really good at looking at what's happening at the next level. A lot of those elite wide receivers aren't being guarded like that.
I'd also say you got to help them out a little bit more with the pass rush, as Mike mentioned. As a fan, one of the things that's been the most disappointing for me is I thought in the early stages of the season, Georgia had really demonstrated it had a better pass rush than it had a year ago. It was non-existent against Alabama. Good offensive line may be the reason why. For the most part, non-existent against Florida. Not as good of an offensive line. Maybe you say injuries, but the outside linebackers for the most part were playing. Georgia just could not quite get that pass rush going in the biggest games that it played this season, and that's a disappointment.
But they were trying to double and bracket Pitts and Tony a lot on a lot of plays there where you got to add up the math to get to 11. What do you want to do? Do you want to make sure you got Pitts taken away, or are you bringing a lot of guys all the time? I think that was the dice roll they had to make.
Jeff, did you get the ball? 21-21. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
It was 21-21 when he went out of the game. When Pitts went out of the game.
That's a very fair point. And I know a lot of people have said, Florida didn't look the same without Pitts. They still scored points, especially late in the half. And I think Mike's point earlier, about the offense not necessarily helping the defense. All the time that defense spent on the field in the second quarter, you could just tell going into halftime they were just wheezing in there.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Go ahead. Yeah, but it was 21-21. But you got to remember, I think Georgia got outscored 38-14 in really quick fashion after that, and it looked like Florida, whether it was wheel route. Greg McElroy had some scintillating things to say this week about how Georgia and everybody kept trying to defend that wheel route. That I believe it's going around the scouting world that wheel route was something Florida picked up from Alabama and copied it and imported that into their game plan. I mean, to me, I know the score is what it was when Kyle Pitts left, but the fact is Georgia had a puncher's chance, more than a puncher's chance after that. But it goes back to the trigger guy that Mike keeps talking about. They just didn't have the pieces to put the points on the board.
It's Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Let's kind of shift gears and finish with this. We're not really at a halfway point in the season, but we are at a break in the season with the off week kind of thrust upon us against Missouri on Saturday. So it's an interesting time to look back at what we have seen thus far, and bad memories against Florida, prominent in your mind. Bad memories against Alabama, probably still lingering as well. But if I force you to think of something positive, a happy memory that maybe you think the Georgia fans have thus far, or something you personally have enjoyed, Mike, is there anything that comes to mind for you that you do think has been a fun thing about this season thus far, and maybe a positive moment that the Georgia fans ought to be paying attention to?
I think the Lewis Cine hit on Kyle Pitts was unbelievable. I hadn't seen a hit like that in 10 years. I mean, he talk about turning out the lights, talk about, playing it for your team. Florida's stupidity. They want to hang a guy like that out over the middle with a guy like Lewis Cine on the other side of the ball. Let me tell you, that's a hit that's going to resonate with every opposing receiver before they play Georgia. They're going to know where they're going to be worried about Lewis Cine. That's the kind of hit you never forget. And it was a beautiful hit. It was a clean hit. He lowered his shoulder. He hit in the target zone between the waist and the shoulders. Pitts lowered his head into it. The way Lewis got up and clearly concussed, but shook his head like a boxer that wasn't going down. I mean, I'm going to say the word badass. I'll only say it once, but it just was deserving of that word. It was unbelievable. That's a hit I won't ever forget.
I can't imagine how tough you have to be to do that. And, maybe based on the way the game is now, maybe the advice to Cine is you actually shouldn't do that. I don't even really know anymore. So much of the physicality has been legislated out of the game. But just to even want to is something that's so foreign to me, because Pitts is obviously so physically tough. And obviously, I hope he gets well soon, too, because I got nothing but respect for him as a player.
Doesn't it just give Connor, don't you just get in a surge of adrenaline? I mean, at some point, whether you wore pads or you did it in the backyard on your little brother, man, when you hit somebody like that, guys, I mean, I get excited just thinking about it. That hit got me out of my chair, man.
Mike, maybe it's just because I've grown up with this new wave of I've grown up essentially in the acknowledgement of concussion era. I saw that hit first thing. I mean, yeah, it's great that you knocked him out, but you're out of the game. Was that hit really worth it to me? I don't know. But I certainly see and understand and appreciate the point you're making there. And I think you saw sort of the impact Cine has for this defense, which I think, Mike, you've done a good job pointing out this week, was perhaps maybe a little underappreciated, just given sort of, I think the wheels completely fell off after he left the game there. For me, the positive memory, I'll go two here. I'll go the Auburn game. I know it feels eons ago, but that first half, Stetson Bennett was cooking. Defense was looking stout. Bo Nix, minimum levels of fun that day. It feels forever ago, and that Auburn team I don't think was quite what we all thought it was at that point in time. That was a fun night, and actually, if there were 93,000 fans in Sanford Stadium, I'm sure we'd talk about that for a little while.
I do think the needle on Auburn may be moving. Now, it's been 12 weeks since they played, so who knows anymore. But the needle may be moving a little bit more back in the positive direction of that feeling like a decent, okay win.
Yeah, someone came on here and said earlier this year that playing Auburn early in the season was going to be a good thing. So, maybe I'll end up being right on that, on my KJ Costello stuff. But another point there of a player that I've sort of liked what I've seen the last couple of weeks. I know Mike doesn't think he should get any carries, but it's Zamir White, back-to-back 100-yard games, 75-yard touchdown run to open things up against Florida. I know people said they wanted to see him get the ball more. I mean, the reality is when you can't throw the ball and Florida's just putting 8 guys in a box, it makes things incredibly difficult. But I think these last 2 games, and I think you saw maybe a little bit more of it with JT Daniels at the trigger on Saturday. He's starting to slowly get that big burst back that we saw out of him from high school, and he's looking more and more like the guy we ultimately thought he would be. I don't know if he, what his future holds at Georgia, because given the shelf life at running backs, if you show any promise, you can go to the league and be a successful player right away. But I've liked what I've seen from Zamir these last 2 weeks, and for all that he's been through to get to this point, I think it says a lot about him and his character as a person.
I think that's really true. I like both of yours, Connor. I think you're 100% right on both fronts. Jeff, you got something positive from this season that you've enjoyed thus far?
Yeah, I just want to add something. Mike's pick was good because I think it's overblown. Remember the 2017 recruiting cycle when it was fun, Brandon, gentlemen, when that was the term savages? Lewis Cine is all about that smoke, and he is a straight savage. You talked about that play against Florida. I would put the greatest hits for Lewis Cine in 2020. Remember when Auburn has that pulling guard coming around, and Lewis Cine drops that 300-pound guard on his tukush, taking on that smoke right there on Auburn pulling. And that's something you very rarely see in the SEC. I mean, Cine has always been about that.
Yeah, he's a tough dude now. He's a very tough guy. No question about that.
Got another year at Georgia, at least another year at Georgia. I think just one more year at Georgia. Brandon, for me, and I guess this feels kind of like 2020, that my best moment for Georgia has to happen before the coronavirus hit. But for me, because it's in my lane on a lot of levels, the best thing that happened to Georgia in 2020 was Brock Vandagriff decommitting from Oklahoma and then choosing Georgia. Because, Brandon, I don't know what your show would be like, but I can certainly guess.
Oh my God.
If Brock Vandagriff wasn't committed in January, let's forget about the 5-star, and everybody loves having a 5-star ranking coming. Brandon, I would say about 67% of Amarius Mims and the recruiting efforts for the 2021 class, which is still number 6 overall, that's been shepherded. That's been triggered. You like that word, Mike? Triggered? That's been triggered by Brock Vandagriff actually playing the president of the Athens-Clarke County Chamber of Commerce, hosting all these guys coming in from all across the country. And I think a big weight on the 2021 recruiting class, much less Georgia. Oh, well, at least we got the 5-star coming on the way with all these quarterback worries and ills right now. Brock Vandagriff choosing Georgia, being such a soldier on the recruiting trail for Georgia, that's the best thing that could have happened to Georgia in 2020.
Riding on Jeff's coattails there a little bit, Brock Vandagriff decommitted January 1st from Oklahoma. That was the same day as the Sugar Bowl. It is safe to say that Georgia's 2020 has literally been all downhill since January 1st this year.
pretty much the rest of society, I guess, maybe. Let me give you one real quick, and I'm being completely serious about this. What Georgia did against Arkansas week 1 looks more and more amazing by the day. Bad first half, huge response in the second half, coasted to an easy victory. Georgia was a 28-point favorite, won by 27. I think people thought, well, I guess they, finally, kind of messed around and got the margin of victory back to where it was supposed to be. We have learned a lot about Arkansas since then, and everything we've learned has made that Georgia win against Arkansas look more and more impressive after the fact. This is one of those things that had everything that happened against Arkansas happened much later in the season, I think it would have been more celebrated by Georgia fans, whereas at the time it was kind of like, oh my gosh, just the response was completely different. I know it's a
I can't. I mean, that's a team that had lost 19 straight games and hadn't won at home since 2016. I know exactly what you're saying, but I can't make that the start of the Georgia highlight. But to your point, it is more impressive, but I can't start my highlight reel there.
Well, but unfortunately, there is not a whole lot of else that's going to go. If you're not going to put that in the video, it's going to be a pretty short video, first of all. If that's your highlight, if your highlight video doesn't include Arkansas, then it's going to be more of a 30-second clip as opposed to a true highlight deal. But at the time, it was almost quasi-embarrassing of, oh my gosh, how is Georgia even playing in this game against Arkansas? We'll see how Arkansas does against Florida on Saturday. I don't expect them to win. Maybe they can find a way to keep that one a little closer than the experts think.
Yes,
but
sir.
Dismantling Arkansas the way they did in the second half, just based on the fact that really no one else has had as easy a time doing that, I think it actually speaks semi-high of Georgia. They were able to do that. back against the wall on the road like that.
What about the run that Kendall Milton had where it took 9 Tennessee guys to get him down? That's the other one that I really
I will agree with you, Mike. I think that's the single most exciting play. It kind of happened near the end of the game. It was well in doubt. I think it's the single most exciting play of the entire year. I do.
No. Oh, come on. Zamir White's 75 touchdown run to start the game was more exciting than that.
Yeah, you may be right about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is
interception. The Eric Stokes pick six that put Georgia back ahead, to me, was the most exciting play.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I had more people bring up the Kendall Milton play, even though it happened near the end of a game that was already well decided. It itself was not a touchdown. It's only, I think Mike says, only like a 9-yard run. But it's how many tackles did he break? It was such a feat. It was such an accomplishment to just shake off that many, would-be SEC tacklers that maybe it's the most spectacular thing. You're right. Not the most exciting. I would say the Zamir touchdown to start the game against Florida probably gets that, or maybe the long Cook touchdown against Alabama might get some consideration there. But the spectacular nature of Milton shaking off that many tacklers and just overpowering people, it was amazing how many people I had bring that play up to me over the course of the next few days after that. So there's kind of a shock and awe to it that I don't know that any other play had for Georgia thus far this season.
I gotta go with Connor. I think there's at least 3 or 4 plays. The Cook wheel route where Georgia hit somebody on a wheel route against what might be a national championship team this year in Tuscaloosa. That was breathtaking. And let's just call it what it is. Like, I want you to go back to the last 2 quarters of Arkansas and the first 2 quarters of Auburn. That was the zenith of the Georgia season right there, because it was 4 consecutive quarters of wow football. Georgia was fun. They found some lightning in a bottle there with Stetson Bennett when he shouldn't have been playing like that at all. And if you want to talk about the season highlight reel, I think most of the season highlight reel would have a lot of second half Arkansas and first half Auburn in that reel.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. All right, that's our Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Got a little bit of time here to squeeze in some Cover More. We'll take your questions and comments about anything that we should have brought up. Your chance to influence the content here for another moment. Jeff Horton says that we're going to lose another game. Boy, I hope not. It would not be good. It would not be good if
Jeff
Georgia
would look real smart for predicting Georgia was going to go 7-3 on one of these broadcasts earlier.
I was actually thinking about that.
I've got one that we didn't bring up, guys. Are they going to wear the black jerseys this year, or were those just for show?
I think they are.
You think they're going to wear them?
I think they're going to wear them. I think, why did they wear them against Louisiana in 2016? Georgia needed some juice. Kirby Smart's been mentioning juice a lot recently. I think if there were ever a time to bring it out, you do it now. Maybe Mississippi State, certainly Vanderbilt on senior day. I think some of these seniors, Richard LeCount, if he, knock on wood, hopefully he comes back for that game. Some of the seniors that have been through this program, maybe you bring them back for that. I hope we see the black jerseys this year.
I think it's commendable that they're at least this committed to the gimmick of, like, they updated the black jerseys, but they still not going to wear them. Like, there's a certain – I'm just impressed with the fact that they are so committed to the notion of we've got them, but we're not going to wear them. Let's do a couple more.
Hey, Brandon, while you're looking for one, I want to just really dial this up right now. Georgia quarterback X, let's just say John X, in the next game, he goes 24 out of 33 for 344, 4 touchdowns. Pickens has 150 yards receiving. How quickly is everything escalated and jacked back up in this program?
I mean, it's going to be hard. Everything is opponent specific. I mean, I'm not saying that the performance would be downgraded, but Georgia fans only get excited about big wins. And frankly, the last couple of years, they haven't even gotten that excited about those. So I think it'll be viewed, unfortunately, I think it'll be viewed as empty calories. People will enjoy it while it happens, but it's not going to be one of those things where, I mean, it'll give the media people who want to hype things up, it'll give them an off season to sing that same song again. But in terms of
all of us,
in terms of actual fan behavior, I don't think it's going to change that much for fans. Fans crave the kind of wins that put you in the national championship picture.
I don't know, but I think fans, look, yeah, you're a fan. I think you'd greatly appreciate some positive stuff to go into the offseason with. But for me personally, Jeff, to answer your question, while yes, I think it'd be great if JT Daniels specifically comes out and looks very good to close the season, or Carson Beck, as Mike mentions there. But until they do it against a Florida and an Alabama consistently, I'll always have sort of my guard up and say, do it against the big boys, do it against the dogs that you are the similar size against.
I want to get Bob Fakay's question before we're done, but let me just say this, that, and I hate to be this way, but it's just, I think the truth. It's actually a semi-problem for Georgia especially if it's someone like Daniels who hasn't played yet. If he were to play well at any point over the course of the rest of the season, I think there's a huge pocket of Georgia fans who will just say, why did you wait till so late to do this? And frankly, Kirby brings that upon himself when he hasn't been more forthcoming about what JT Daniels' true health situation actually is. So y'all can hear me now, believe me later. If a quarterback that hasn't played yet does play well for Georgia before the season's done, be ready for there to be some complaints on shows like this of, well, I guess, once the chance of winning the SEC East is over and done, now it's time to put a quarterback in the game who has a chance to do some big things for dogs. That's coming.
So you'd rather just see Georgia have terrible quarterback play the rest of this season?
It's not about what I would rather. It's about Kirby setting himself up where he's kind of double bound here. He's going to get criticized on both sides of this just because of the way the first 6 games have played.
So if he's going to get criticized no matter what, why not just go out there and have great quarterback play?
Yeah, people will be, for the most part, happy about it, but there will be more complaints of too little too late. I'm just telling you, I've got my finger on the pulse. That is what's coming. There's going to be a lot of too little too late in the comment section.
Georgia could be undefeated and people would still be complaining.
and who knows, maybe Kirby would rather us talk about quarterbacks than his defense getting lit up for historically bad numbers when it was supposed to be the best defense in Georgia history.
Yeah, that could be true as well. So Bob Fakay says, who's coming back next year that has the option? Now in 2020, I guess everybody's got the option to do whatever they want to do. It seems like, all is fair on that. Anybody got an opinion on a junior one way or another that's definitely leaving, definitely coming back, or anything along those lines? This is such a weird year. I don't even know.
Do we extend this to maybe sophomores that would be
I'm not
coming
doing
back?
that. I'm not doing rumor mill stuff on that kind of stuff.
I'm just okay. Check your. You gave us hear me now and believe me later. Hans and Franz Saturday night.
No, it's not an unfair question. I'm saying it's not an unfair question. Should we talk about which sophomores may dip? That's not an unfair question. I'm just saying I would prefer not to trade in such salacious rumors.
Tongue was firmly in cheek when I was mentioning sophomores there. I'll take a stab at this. Guys that I think will come back.
All-star, all-SEC guys that could go pro that are going to come back. How about that?
Oh, yeah. That's totally different. That's a much quicker
I'm going to go
conversation.
first. I'm going to say Jake Camarda.
Has a junior ever left as a punter?
Just saying, he's an all-star guy that could go.
That's Mike trying to take the 4-putt putt. I respect that there.
Wait, hold on. I'm actually semi-fascinated by this because, if you're a good punter at 20 years old, it's not like you're going to get better at 25, I don't guess. But have juniors ever left to go punt in the NFL?
Not even kick, I don't think. Janikowski didn't even leave.
You're not talking to a kicking expert here.
They're generally team players.
That's an interesting.
They're not worried about their shelf life in terms of they only got so much tread on the cleat.
Listen, Jake Camarda would be on that highlight film a lot. Unfortunately, he really would. He's had an incredible year.
He's a great.
He's an All-American. Yeah, really, except when it matters.
I have two that certainly qualify more than Jake Camarda, who granted will probably be an All-SEC punter this year. I believe Tyson Campbell and Jamari Sire are both going to come back for this team this year.
Tyson Campbell.
So Eric Stokes is definitely gone. Eric Stokes, as Mike pointed out correctly earlier, Eric Stokes has been great this season. I think he's going to be a highly drafted corner.
He's a redshirt junior, is that right?
Yeah, so it's his 4th year in the program anyway. Yeah. I believe he's close to, or if not already has his degree. With Campbell specifically, you look at the Alabama game and the Florida game. He has struggled in those games, and those are the games where you as a corner have a chance to really make some money. And I think he's actually lost a little bit of money there. So coming back for him another year to get experience at corner, which is where, if you're a defensive back, that's where you want to play at the NFL level because they just make more money than safety. So I think there's an incentive there for him to come back. And I would also just point out, Georgia's gotten some surprise defenders back in the years past as well. So I think there's a decent track record there defensively. As far as Jamari Sawyer, who I think has been, I think we'd all probably agree there. I don't know if he's been Andrew Thomas levels good, but he's been a very solid left tackle for Georgia this year. And with him, I think another year on tape of him being potentially a left tackle, while guard might be his best long-term future. You look at a guy like Isaiah Wynn, who benefited from coming back and playing left tackle in 2017. And ultimately that convinced an NFL team, the Patriots, to draft him and employ him as a left tackle. And when he's been healthy, he's played really well there. So while Jamari Sawyer has been very good this year, and I wouldn't be shocked if he found his way in an all-SEC ballot at the end of the year, I think another year at Georgia, he raises his stock even more, can potentially work himself into being a first-round draft pick.
I lowered my camera angle down. I keep slouching down to the point I was barely in the frame. I had to lower myself down. Jeff, you got a junior you think's going to come back, or one you think's not coming back? I guess we're open for that too.
Connor, I like what you were cooking there a little bit, but imagine Georgia's offensive line next year if Salyer can move inside and play a guard, and then maybe Broderick Jones and Tate Ratledge would be ready to play, or maybe Amarius Mims would be able to play at the tackle spot.
Boy, I'd love for those two guys. No disrespect to the guys who have been playing tackle for Georgia, Salyer being one of them. I'd love for Ratledge and Jones to get some experience before the year is done.
And then the other thing is you got to look at Trey Hill. What is Trey Hill doing? Is he showing himself as a center? Remember those high snaps? Maybe he needs to refine that a little bit.
They haven't just been high; they've been all over the place.
And then maybe he could actually spot it at a guard. Man, that Georgia offensive line could be very sporty if you could get Salyer and Hill at the guard, Cedric Von Pron in the middle, and you could get Mims, Ratledge, McClendon, and Jones at your tackles. I don't think Azeez Ojulari would be coming back.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Ojulari being a redshirt sophomore, I have no idea what his draft status is. I'm not like Connor. I don't really read as much, pre-draft stuff.
A lot of it's second round, one of the top 5 outside backers, edge guys. I think Dana, the athletic draft guy, I think his name is Dana Brugler. He had him as the third best prospect in the Georgia-Alabama game. He saw him as a second, third rounder. One thing about Azeez, though, Brandon, this might keep you warm at night. Azeez and that family certainly values education and getting his degree, and that's what he came to Georgia for, is to get his degree. And I think he probably wouldn't leave Georgia without it, or at least a really strong track at getting the degree. I think Azeez starts the conversation about the most cross-your-fingers dog nation guy that could come back for 2021.
Yeah.
What about Trey McKitty?
You said all SEC level, though, right?
He'll be, 30 years old next year?
I think he's an NFL talent. I mean, he's a Senior Bowl guy. I mean, if you're McKitty, do you come back to get more on film, or do you say, I've had enough of this place? They've only thrown me 3 completions past the halfway point of the year.
Well, history would say if you have a chance to leave the Georgia offense, you typically do.
Does Zamir White leave on those 2 surgically repaired knees?
That's got to get your money. That's to me one of, I think, him and James Cook, who has put a little bit of out there on tape and played well the last couple of games. Those are probably offensively the 2 things I'm most interested in. And it's hard not to think back to 2016, where Sony and Nick certainly had draftable grades. Nick himself had a very significant knee injury. And those guys came back, and Georgia went on the run it did on the backs of those guys in 2017. You wonder if potentially Kirby trots out that same pitch there for James Cook and Zamir White. And I would say it worked out for Sony and Nick. They both ended up going in the top 35 draft picks the next year.
Yeah,
I don't know that Zamir could hold off. I don't know that Zamir could hold off Kendall Milton, guys. I think Milton's an incredible talent. No offense to Zamir.
And I don't disagree with you. I'm someone who was as high on Milton all offseason when everyone was talking about Zach Evans. But yeah, I mean that's certainly a fair point to bring up, Mike.
But I don't know
Elijah Holyfield effect.
I don't know if it's holding off anything. Georgia would rotate the 2 backs very well. They just rotate to what they've always done historically and keep both of them fresh.
I'm also a believer that, typically speaking, listen, I'd love for Cook and White both to come back because I think they're both really good players, but I think the presence of upperclassmen at the running back spot can be a little bit of a problem, because I think you want that cycle to keep spinning. So guys are going to the NFL, so there are more carries to go around. So you can get, that next guy to come in. I think the presence of upperclassmen is a problem for a program that's really functioning as well as it could be, as often as it is not. You want guys to come in, thrive, move on to the NFL, so you can get that next generation in there. You certainly don't want to be in a position where you have to be saved by older players the way that Georgia probably was in 2017.
Mike, make your point about upperclassmen again, because I agree with it.
My point, well, yeah, for your program to be at its best, your seniors need to have their best year. And I feel like Georgia's seniors this year have not had their best year. I mentioned Monty Rice and Mark Webb. I guess those are the two guys that come to jump to mind, Connor. Is there somebody I'm missing? I think the receiving core all comes back. I don't think you need to worry about losing Matt Landers this year. Listen, I think Matt Landers, when there's a quarterback that gets the ball downfield, he is my surprise breakout guy. I heard he had an incredible offseason, and I'm telling you, I think Matt Landers is going to be a guy that's going to break through before it's all said and done.
I mean, one of the reasons why they keep throwing to him is he does get open, or at least he open enough to throw it to him, and his teammates love him. And, listen, for as frustrated as at times, fans have been, I think some of that ends up being unfair. People just have a tendency just to become nasty about players who go through struggles. I just don't like that.
And sports writers.
But Landers' teammates love him, and I've heard them talk about him before, and that's got to at least count for something.
Yeah. I guess the names Julian Rochester and Demetrius Robertson also have to be mentioned in this conversation. Maybe even a Ben Cleveland as well.
I hope Rochester stays at Georgia for like 10 more years. I hope that he's just playing here. I mean, it seems like he was in high school a dozen years ago.
What about Devontae Wyatt? That's another name that I think has some stack to it. I think he's going to be a draftable NFL guy, and I think his stock's a little higher than maybe because he just moves so well. Then maybe even
he's athletic. Yeah, he's a very athletic defensive lineman.
Got banged up earlier this year. Remember, he was starting and then he wasn't. He was banged up, and he was one of the guys that actually stepped up and played really well against Florida. I think he'd be kind of on the edge.
What about Malik? That's
Malik
another name that comes to mind. Malik didn't have a really good Alabama game. He didn't really have some great games earlier this year, and he was a guy that had a lot of juice coming in as well. And I know that's a guy that will have to look at his draft grade.
Well, to BA's point, I think we've just all circled back, and we started out talking about what's the importance of the last 4 games, and the importance of the last 4 games to me is to get that. And Connor said it: have fun. Create an environment where these guys say, you know what, let's come back. We believe in it. I think that starts with the trigger, though. I think these guys have to see a quarterback play and say, if I'm coming back, we got another shot for a title. I know that money is a big factor. I know the draft stock is a big factor. But how does Clemson keep these guys? How does Alabama keep these guys? They do it because they believe in the program and they like being around one another. And that, to me, BA, is what needs to happen in the next 4 games.
That is a perfect way to conclude this show. Mike, well said there. Thanks for being here. A part of Cover 4 Line, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Make sure you check out Georgia Farm Bureau online, gfbinsurance.com. They can save you money in your home, your auto, your life insurance. That matters. But you can also take a look at the work they're doing to support the agricultural community here in our state, Georgia's farmers, and just find out about how the folks who work at Georgia Farm Bureau live and work and play in communities just like the one you live in. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. Go to gfbinsurance.com. You can certainly find out a whole lot more about that and find out how they can potentially save you a lot of money. A lot of Dog Nation stuff coming up over the weekend. I'll see you tomorrow morning for Dog Nation Daily. Jeff Sintel will be a part of that. A lot of good content heading through the weekend as Georgia hopes to get back to business next Saturday, back home again for the first time in a while against Mississippi State. So stay close to Dog Nation for all of that. Thanks for being here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Y'all have a great night. We'll look forward to seeing you again back here again next week.